80 years ago, 7,000 prisoners of the German Nazi camp called Auschwitz were liberated. It's an hour's drive outside Krakow, Poland, and many gathered there a few weeks ago to remember, including world leaders and some survivors. The numbers are staggering: 1.1 million murdered over 1,689 days. Not to mention the pain, suffering, and humiliation that countless thousands endured. Auschwitz was the largest of all the death camps, opened in 1940 in southern Poland during World War II. At the 80th anniversary, many remembered and said, "Never again." But we live in a time when too few remember. One survivor said, "To speak about the meaning and value of life may seem more necessary today than ever. All people are made in the image of God, and all have fallen. May we be ambassadors of the good news of redemption in Jesus." Welcome to Haven Today on this Monday. I'm David Wolin, sharing the great story that's all about Jesus, and we're starting a series called Christ, Our Hiding Place. This week, I'm looking forward to sharing an amazing story of hope with you as we remember the late Corrie ten Boom. She and her family were Dutch Christians who helped hide Jews as they were being rounded up by the Nazis where she lived in the Netherlands during World War II. In a few moments, we're going to hear more about Corrie from her former assistant, the late Pamela Roswell Moore. And then, later on, we'll hear a recording from Corrie ten Boom herself.
I'd always known about Jesus. And now in solitary confinement, I had started to really know that his light is stronger than the deepest darkness.
More in a few minutes from Corrie ten Boom, and also a conversation with her assistant, the late Pam Roswell Moore, who spent several years traveling with Corrie and knew her well. And after the program today, with our sincere thanks for your gift to this listener-supported ministry, I want to send you Corrie's autobiography, a book called The Hiding Place. And I actually read this book myself for the first time a few months ago, and I was spellbound. It reads like a novel, except every word is true, but the value isn't only that it's a riveting story. Corrie tells us her spiritual journey, how the Lord was so present with her and her family, how he met her in the darkest hours and made good on his word. And that's why this is such a tremendously faith-building book. Whatever you and I may face, we can trust the same God who sustained Corrie is there with us, sustaining every moment. And so I'd encourage you to call us after the program and make your gift. And when you do, be sure to ask for The Hiding Place. The number is 800-654-2836. 800-654-2836, or you can visit haventoday.org. That's haventoday.org. I'm David Wolin, and now I'm excited to share with you a fascinating conversation about Corrie ten Boom's story. Some listening today may know that story, or at least know of it, but what you're going to hear today is a conversation with someone who knew her very, very well. And since Corrie passed away many decades ago, this is about as close to living memory as we can get. And it was a little over a decade ago that my predecessor, Charles Morris, sat down with Pamela Roswell Moore, who was Corrie's assistant. Now, Pamela has passed away not too long ago. She's now with the Lord, but this is an amazing conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. Let's listen in.
Pam, living now outside Dallas, Texas, I want to welcome you to Haven Today.
Thank you very much, Charles. I'm glad to be with you today.
Pam, you spent a lot of time with Corrie during her last years here on Earth. Some of our listeners might not even know her amazing story. Can you take us back to the beginning? Who was Corrie ten Boom? Who was her family? Why did they risk their lives to rescue Jews from the Nazis?
Corrie was Dutch and born in 1892. She was the youngest of 4 children, 1 brother and 2 sisters, Betsy Willem, and then Nolly, and then Corrie, whose full name would be Cornelia ten Boom. Ten Boom family was a very close one, and the Bible, the Word of God, was central to the life of the family. Really, they just talked about the Lord Jesus. They obviously knew him. So Betsy and Corrie still lived in what they called the Bayet, and the Bayet was to become a refuge for many Jewish people who were being sought after by the Nazis. Mainly, they helped people to safety through contacts where they could get to farmland in the north of the country. In 1942, the persecution of the Jewish people, which hadn't been too bad at first, it began, and the ten Boom's family, father, Corrie and Betsy, had a hiding place built in the very top of their very small house. The first floor was a watch shop, because that was Father ten Boom's profession. And then the second place had a large room with a couple of bedrooms, very small ones. And right at the top of the house was Corrie's bedroom. And that was where the hiding place was, so that if Jewish people had to hide, it would be the farthest away from the door as possible, the front door.
And Pam, once the Nazis invaded, they began to gather the Jews and ship them to concentration camps. And that created a huge dilemma for many of the Dutch who were Christians. Should they help the Jews or should they not? Well, let's listen to a clip from the movie The Hiding Place.
I have my own family to think of. We could lose everything for that child. Where would my church be without a shepherd?
But...
No, Betsy. The pastor has decided.
It is the law, and Christians must obey the law. Think what you are risking for the sake of one Jewish baby.
And will you report us, Pastor, if the baby must stay a while with us?
Corrie, we are meant to obey the law of the state if it does not go against a higher law of God. And we will keep the child.
It is on your heads.
A little bit from the movie The Hiding Place, a film based on Corrie ten Boom and her family's life during World War II. And you're listening to Haven Today. I'm Charles Morris. We're talking to the assistant of the late Corrie ten Boom, Pam Rosewell Moore. And Pam, obviously the Christian pastor in this clip was concerned about his life and his family's life if they helped the Jews. The Nazis created a lot of fear, which caused many people not to help. Could you just think back with me now and tell me what was different about the ten Boom family? Why did they help the Jews, knowing that the risk was so great?
The family had always been interested in the Jewish people. Willem ten Boom, who was a minister, he was the only professionally educated member of the family. He was the only boy. And he had particular interest in the Jewish people, and he had been saying since quite early in the 1930s that the Jews were going to be persecuted. And then they saw that build-up happen. They'd always prayed for the Jewish people. They'd always prayed for the peace of Jerusalem. They often used the word shalom. They were thoroughly Dutch, but there was this part of their life, an important part of their being, which loved the Jewish people. So when the war came, Corrie wanted to do whatever could be done. She was always the ringleader in the family. I'm sure Betsy was. It wasn't hard to persuade Betsy that it was the right thing. And Father ten Boom agreed. So eventually this little hiding place was built.
Pam, let's go on with the story here. The ten Booms had hidden many Jewish people that were passing through kind of an underground railroad. What happened then?
It was very unofficial, and it consisted really of many contacts, many other people. Corrie, an outgoing leader, trusted leader for so many years, had many contacts, and she had what she called her boys. They were young men who would dress up as women if they could and go on their bikes, and they would be her messengers and go round. And it's so hard to believe in our day when we can get in touch with each other in seconds, really. But they didn't. They had to go around on bikes and make sure they weren't caught.
How long were they able to hide Jewish people in the house, in the hiding place?
The hiding place was built in 1942, but it wasn't until later in the war, I think the end of 1943, that they started using it, that they had more and more Jewish people coming to the front door. So they took in as many as they could. It was, as I say, a very small house. But they had such fun. Apart from the tragedy of it all, there's a Dutch word, it's gezellig, and it's not translatable. It means cozy, but in English, to have the word gezellig, you'd have to say, you could be cozy. You and I, we could be cozy at Christmas if we were sitting by a fire and with music in the background. But in that word gezellig, used all through the whole of the Netherlands, in many generations as I know, it has to involve people. So what happened was gezelligheid, this coziness. They would have their Jewish visitors at the table. Betsy would serve soup and made with whatever she could find in the stores, and apparently she was very good at soup. People loved Betsy's soup. And the Jewish people who had to hide, of course, it must have been so difficult to be inside a very small house for so long. But the Ten Boom family had a certain culture. They loved music, and the Jewish people, of course, a lot of them were very good at music, and they played and they sang. And I remember the story that one neighbour said, "Corrie, tell your Jews to be quiet. The whole street can hear he's singing."
Let's go to the door. Yes, I go. Yes, in a moment. Mrs. Bukers. Oh. Betsy, are you crazy? The whole street can hear your Jews singing. Thank you.
And that, of course, is the moment you were talking about, Pam, from the film The Hiding Place. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Haven Today, and this is a program about the life of Corrie ten Boom. We're talking with Pam Rosewell Moore, who was Corrie's assistant for many years. So, Pam, the ten Boom family helped rescue many Jews over the course of just a couple of years, but the Nazis eventually learned about what they were doing. Can you tell us about that?
Towards the end of the war, there was a knock on the door, and Corrie was ill in bed. She had a bad bronchial infection. It was the flu and a kind of pleurisy. And somebody was at the door saying, "Miss ten Boom, I need your help. If you could give me 400 guilders, I will be able to get my wife free from the Germans. They suspect my wife. Please give me 400 guilders." So this man was a traitor. He took the money and he went straight to the German authorities with it. In a sense, their ministry ended on that day as far as being able to help and save any more people. They had a buzzer which allowed them to, if they thought there was any danger, they could press the buzzer and the Jewish people would go quickly up into the hiding place at the top of the house. And they would put away the crockery very quickly, the cups and saucers, the soup plates. And it usually took, of course, a couple of minutes. But it was the Germans themselves and the Nazis. And they said, "Let us in. We know you're hiding Jews here." Well, the hiding place was made so carefully. It wasn't a false wall. It was proper brick. Built in Corrie's bedroom, a very parallel, of course, to the outside wall, with one small grating for air. And they could get in through the door, which was a linen closet. There was a way to move a panel right at the bottom and go inside and then put the panel down again, rearrange the items that had been on the lower panel, up in front of the lower panel. So this they did, and they knocked all over the house. They could not find it. They did not find that hiding place.
Wow.
But Corrie and Betsy and father were taken away. The story is that they loved the Jewish people, and the family was arrested. Corrie and Betsy learnt of their father's death in that prison on the west coast after 10 days of imprisonment. And then Corrie and Betsy were transferred to a Dutch concentration camp in the south of the Netherlands. And then they put Corrie and their other prisoners on a dreadful journey in cattle trucks, which went deep into Germany. They couldn't see much, but they knew that was the way it was going. And they eventually arrived at a women's prison called Ravensbrück, deep in Germany.
Yes.
Corrie called it the deepest hell that man can create.
Pam, thank you so much for sharing with us this profound story. And we'll hear a little bit more from you on tomorrow's program and how God came to the aid of Corrie and Betsy ten Boom in the concentration camps. But as we close, I want our listeners to hear Corrie describe with her Dutch accent what those first days in the camp were like for her. She was in solitary confinement due to an illness, and she felt utterly alone.
Perhaps for the first time in my life, I was really alone. And I knew my life was completely in the hands of the enemy. They could kill me or torture me, or just forget me altogether. There was no one to know. At night, the sounds of distant bombs penetrated the thick walls, and the muffled cries of people being tortured by the Gestapo. That was a little bit of hell. I tried singing, but the guards pounded on the door for silence. They threatened to take me to the dark cell. In the dark cell, you had to stand in water. Time became a very thick thing to have to wade through. There was a possibility each moment of the day and night that he would come for me. Whenever I heard footsteps outside my cell, I would ask myself, do they come to torture me, to kill me? Once I stood with my back against the wall of my cell, with my hands spread out as if I would push it away, and I was that scared. And then I said, Lord, I'm not strong enough to stand all this. My faith is not strong enough. Then I saw an ant. I had seen for days roaming over the floor. I just mopped the floor with a wet rag. The moment the ant felt the water on the stones, he ran to a little hole in the wall. He did not stop to look at the wet rag or his weak feet. He went straight to his hiding place. Corrie, don't look at your faith. It is weak like the tiny feet of that ant. Don't think of the possibilities of those cruel people. I am your hiding place. And you can come to me like that ant disappeared into the hole in the wall. And for the first time there came a real peace in my heart. I was 53 years old then. I'd always known about Jesus. And now in solitary confinement I had started to really know that his light is stronger than the deepest darkness.
We just heard Corrie ten Boom sharing what it was like in that concentration camp and how God became her hiding place. This is Haven Today. I'm David Wolin, and I just want to acknowledge my gratitude for Charles Morris and the conversation he recorded with the late Pam Roswell Moore. Such a blessing today. And I want to let you know that Charles and Pam will be back tomorrow as we continue with the second half of this amazing story. You know, Corrie ten Boom once said, "There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still." She knew that from experience. And I want you to personally engage with her life-changing story through her own words. Her autobiography can bolster our confidence in the Lord that he really does work through people like you and me, even in the worst of times. The book is The Hiding Place, and it's our way of saying thank you for your support to this ministry of Haven Today, which reaches listeners all around the world with the daily message that leads us back to Jesus. So would you give us a call and make your gift to the ministry? And remember, we're 100% supported by friends like you. Your gift matters. And as our way of saying thank you, we'll send you a copy of The Hiding Place. The number to call, 800-654-2836, 800-654-2836. or visit us online, haventoday.org. Again, haventoday.org. I'm David Wolin. Won't you come back again next time? We'll be keeping it all about Jesus. It's the great story here on Haven Today.